Hello, I'm what people would call a modern Atlus fan. I played Persona 5 and I loved it, and I've gotten every single Atlus game since. Well, I never really got into the SMT games. Something about the series put me off them, the much darker scene being one of the things. So when I heard Atlus was releasing a quote-unquote new series with a character focus, a brighter world, and a general bridge between the Persona SMT series, I thought, wow, this'll be good. Turns out that wasn't the case. What we were left with was something that felt quite half-baked, where it felt every good feature the game had, it brought itself down by doing something questionable or something weird. Anyways, I'm Hart, this is my scarf, and welcome to my review on Soul Hackers 2. Just a heads up. For this review, I'll be talking about everything up to the final story arc of the game. In Soul Hackers 2, you play as Ringo, one of two AI robots born from Ion, a super intelligent AI species, to stop the human apocalypse. So, no pressure. The things that trigger the apocalypse are the 5 covenants, and, when all brought together, can summon an evil entity to destroy the world. It's up to you to track these covenants down and round them up before this bad guy in a mask does it. On your adventure, you meet your party members, JRPG protagonist, Angry Lady, and someone who just wants to get back with their ex. And they all have one thing in common. They all got killed. But that's okay, because you can now use the Soul Hacker part of Soul Hackers, and resurrect them by jumping into their mind and saving their soul. And now you understand the setup to the game a little bit more, let's get on to the meat of the review, shall we? For the first hour of the game, the pacing's actually quite good. After a weird starting sequence that's probably filled with symbolism that I'm too dumb to understand, you're drawn into the story about finding culprits, gathering the covenants, and learning who all these characters are in this world. Although, after the tutorial it kinda goes downhill. After beating the first boss, you're then put into your base of operations, where you quite literally sit down on the sofa while a PowerPoint presentation comes up and people explain to you everything you need to know about the story. You are actually told who these people are, and who the bad guy is, and where everyone is, and you keep being reminded about an invisible faction war that's going on between the two clans that hardly really appear or affect the real world. And when something interesting does happen, either happens in a random cutscene where you're not involved, or there's just no dramatic build-up. The plot just feels like it doesn't go anywhere. I feel like Atlus really backed themselves into a corner, starting a game where the bad guy was 90% done with his evil plan already. It kind of feels like you've been plopped into someone else's game save. It would have been interesting to see it from the very start, hunting everyone down, learning all their characters, or figuring out why these two factions are fighting each other for yourself instead of being told. It just feels like it's cut content in a way, almost like the budget didn't allow the game to be any longer, which is probably the case. I can't get any further in the review without talking about some of the characters of this game. Being the main part of promotional material, you'd think it's something that Atlus prides themselves on, and to be honest, it just ends up being quite frustrating. Seeing Atlus make the Persona characters absolutely shine when faced with hardships and working well together as a group gave me hope for the Soul Hackers series. Half of these characters are just not fun to be around. I don't want to hang out with them and I don't want to get to know them really. I'll run them down one by one for you.
So, you got born into this mess too, huh?
Here's Ringo, your main character. She's the one that you're going to be controlling the whole game, and, refreshingly, she's not a blank slate. She's actually quite likeable and has her own personality, and does show emotion, shows growth, and yet still manages to stick to her robot roots, which I quite thoroughly enjoy. Sticking with the robot roots lets her make a couple jokes about it. For example, being confused why humans react one way or do things another way. It's quite funny and makes her quite entertaining.
Whoa. Never thought the Grim Reaper would be this cute.
Sizo. I mean, do I really need to say anything? Look at his hair, his hat, his shark teeth, his tongue. After getting tip off he had a covenant, you go and meet him at his last known location, a back alley. And that's where you find that his brain has been splattered up against a wall. Yikes. After soul hacking him, you find out he was with his ex and she killed him. So you bring him back to life, he joins the party, and with the goal of trying to make up to his ex, the person who killed him. You okay, bro? Seriously though, Saizo's probably one of the best characters in this game. He's the one who feels the most human out of everyone. Most of his personal story is about him reflecting on what's happened, not liking it, and wanting to leave his past life to start somewhere else. I found myself cheering him on the most throughout his character arc. They did really well with him.
So, you're not human?
Ugh, Arrow. He's one of the first ones you meet in the game. You were told his death was a trigger to the apocalypse, so you go and try and find him, and you find him, well, dead. You soul hack and bring him back to life for him to tell you that he was protecting a girl called Melody. So you team up together and you go to protect this Melody girl. And that's it. He's just so bland. He's like a silent protagonist they decided to give a voice to. I was doing some research for the script and looked up his character's wiki page, and I found out he's the only one that doesn't have a personality paragraph to him, which is actually quite funny. After the first arc, he just kinda exists for some emotional attachment with other characters you meet on your journey. It feels completely shoehorned in to try and make him still be relevant on the later stages of the game. At least with other characters they have some sort of reason to go with Ringo for the rest of the story. But Arrow just doesn't. Why is he here? I just don't know. It's odd. There's so little motivation for him. It just seems weird for him to be here. I fully think you could probably remove this character for the game and not much would change.
I'm dead, you simpleton. There's no—
Melody, or Milady? I'll be honest, I still don't know how to pronounce it. Melody's the person Arrow was trying to protect, which clearly he didn't do a very good job with. She died in the hands of a questionable opponent. When you beat the guy, you soul hack Melody to find out that she was a covenant holder and she was having a target placed on her back for it. Although good news, she knows the person who's trying to pull the strings and gather all the covenants. That guy is her boyfriend. And unfortunately for the character, this relationship's about 50% of it. The other 50% of her is just to say how much she doesn't like what you're doing. I have to say, she does grow a little warmer throughout the story, but since her cold personality at the start, I never really cared for her. And it's not like she's with you for half the social things anyway. I'm not sure if it's unlucky RNG on my end, but she almost never appears during mealtimes or hangout events. It's like she actively goes out her way to make sure she appears unlikable to me. So congrats Melody, you did it. I don't like you.
Mission status initialized.
Fig. She's the other AI bot Iron makes at the start of the game. She's basically Ringo's sister and she's a plot device. Do you get it? It's because she's a robot. She's mostly a background character with no real significance apart from being essentially a recon for your team. She tells you where to go, looks up information, and kinda does the overall planning for the group. Sadly, that's pretty much all I can say about her. Being a robot makes her quite plain, and she doesn't have the same personality as Ringo, which makes her look extra plain. My personal headcanon is someone at Atlus just really wanted a big sister archetype in the game, so Fig was born. Overall, as teammates you're stuck with from the third hour to the very end of the game, they just feel like they don't work well together. Constant fights and an overall feeling of discontent from the characters, especially Melody and Arrow because they're from different factions. I actually much prefer hanging out with the characters one-on-one than a group. It's quite similar to Persona 5 in a way. A bunch of misfits brought together by one person, a leader. But at least in Persona 5, the group bounces off of each other. Meanwhile in Soul Hackers 2, it kinda just feels like the character says their opinion, and the plot just moves forward. There's not much growth as a team. If you played a Persona or SMT game before, then you'll be familiar with the type of gameplay. And you'll enjoy it! The gameplay can be quite fun, even though it can be a bit repetitive at times. There are some slight changes to the systems, however, to try and mix it up. There's a lot less elements in the game compared to others in the series. Your main element attacks are fire, ice, electricity, and two new ones, force and ruin. You also have your physical skills of gun and slice. I personally didn't feel the hindrance with less elements available. I think it even made it more bearable. Another important change is that negative status effect abilities also deal damage. This is quite good, which makes them way more viable compared to past titles. It's actually a viable decision now if you want to throw away the ability to do more damage to get possibly a poison effect on the enemy. For character building, essentially you have free reign to build your team however you want. Kind of. You know how I said at the start every positive seems to have a few downsides? Well, this is one of them. So each team member has a comp, essentially a weapon which gives stats and abilities to your party members. Arrow and Saizo has a gun, while Melody and Ringo has a sword. These are always equipped and can't be changed, so you always have the ability to deal gun or physical damage for free. You can modify these comps to each person, but for some reason a couple elements on some people's comps are just blocked out from being boosted. Why? It's like going up to Subway, seeing all the selection they have, only for the person behind the counter to say, oh, you're not allowed that one specific topping, even though it's right there in front of you. And I know technically you can pay to remove the block, but in that case, just why have the block at all? It's way more fun having free reign on everything, building out the most overpowered team you could. By putting up these pseudo limitations just make it way more annoying than it should be. There's so many fun comp upgrades too, so spending money and wasting space on these suck. Just remove them next time, Atlus, please. Another change to the battle formula is a new Sabbath attack. In the Persona series, when you hit an enemy's weakness, you get a 1 more, which allows you to take an extra turn. In Soul Hackers 2, however, you get a stack added to your Sabbath. Then, after all your party members have taken their turn, turns happen on the team basis instead of the character basis now too, by the way. You unleash a big attack called a Sabbath, with more damage being dealt equal to the amount of stack you have. Over the course of the game, the Sabbaths evolve. For example, some abilities give more stacks when they hit a weakness, and some personas get a Sabbath ability, like Jack Frost here, having one that heals you a percentage of the damage dealt. Overall, I'm quite okay with the Sabbath system. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like it, which surprises me. It rewards you even when you can't knock down everyone, which can be difficult at times. It also allows a different method of play. Targeting one enemy feels way more beneficial compared to knocking the whole group down. Although the animations can get a bit boring. For something that happens every turn, Atlus made a weird decision by having the animation go on for like half a year. And yes, you can skip them, but like, that's just an extra button press. It just feels so unneeded. A shorter, snappier animation would have been way better. And finally, and possibly one of the most coolest abilities, command skills. A system which doesn't use MP and doesn't take up a turn, but has a cooldown system and a limitation of 1 a turn. It essentially can give you big buffs, change out demons, focus your Sabbaths on one target, or even give your characters an extra turn. Definitely adds another element to plan your next move. What's left on the gameplay side? Oh yeah, the dungeon. I'll try not to get too worked up about it, because honestly, this is the worst part of the game. You'd think a dungeon crawling game would have interesting dungeons. For whatever reason, they're the most plain boring things in the entire game. Just corridors and nothing. Not even extra flair or anything to light up the room, just nothing. The most exciting bit in the dungeon is possibly this U-turn. I really don't know what went wrong here. For example, take Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Another niche game by Atlus, probably running on the same budget, but this one is running on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, compare this dungeon with verticality and puzzles to this flat purple haze in Soul Hackers 2. Persona 5's wonderfully crafted dungeons to this uninspired purple haze. Even Persona 4, a game made in 2008 on the PlayStation 2, even their dungeons at least have some personality compared to the bland emptiness of this. And do you know what the best part is? The 3 examples I used for Soul Hackers 2? They're not the same dungeon. In the game there's something called a mirror matrix, which is, long story short, your 3 party members in a brain. It's basically the game's grind area, and it's the most boring thing ever. Each member's dungeons look exactly the same. They're very similar enemies, very similar levels, and it's just a flat purple haze. It just reeks of lack of effort. Like for Arrows, at least put his world in the setting of his apartment. Maybe for Melodies, just make sure it's like red and knives and stuff wants to kill you. And Saizo's, just put pictures of his ex in, at least that'll be funny. And you might be thinking, oh Heart, that's just a side mission. Surely the main games have good dungeons. No, they really don't. And it's actually more insulting than that. All the levels are just flat, the dungeon designs are horrible, the main story revolves you backtracking through the place, and it's just the same boring, flat, nothing dungeon every single time. For example, one main story mission gets you to go through a subway tunnel to find someone. Okay, cool. What's the next story mission, you ask? A slightly different subway tunnel. At least there's nothing else annoying going on in the dungeon.
Incoming!
This owl sucks. I admit, I was baited. Seeing through the Soul Hackers 2 promo, I saw the owl and I was like, yes, I need this owl. And yet, she ends up being the most annoying character in the game. She's essentially a drone, which Fig controls, and that's how she helps you with the recon throughout the game. Although the problem is she has a total of about 6 lines, and they do not shut up. And the combat dialogue isn't much better either.
Smart choice with this power.
Go,
You don't have to tell me twice.
Too strong.
Is it really that hard to have one person speak at a time? It's honestly a shame because the voice acting is so good. So many unique interactions and lines recorded for this game. Like when one character misses their shot, the next character comments on it, or when they use a certain element, they make a quip about it. But all combined together, all repeating each other over at the same time, it's just an overload. Although I have to say, the voice acting in the overworld, pretty good. It's clear the voice actors are talented, Ringo's lines are delivered beautifully, and there's one moment in the final part of the game which I won't spoil, but I feel like it was really good voice acting, and you really felt what the characters were going through at the time. Heck, even the side character tutorial boss has a fun voice actor.
They call me all rest cause I'm a dope MC. All my boys making noise in the COMP. So let's make this body count on 1, 2, 3.
Okay, I just wanted to get this last point in because I think it's also quite important. Battle UI? Great. Amazing. Persona 5-esque, they definitely learnt a lot. Everything is just one button click away. It's fast and snappy, which definitely helps with the amount of battles you go through in this game. The map UI, I mean, it works. It could be a bit better because it's just a list of locations, but there are quite a few places in the game and maybe it got too crowded. It just feels a bit lame to scroll through a menu. The equip UI, however, whoever made this clearly hates me. They never show enough information at one time. This may be a me problem, but I constantly forgot what I had equipped. And with the amount of synergy in this game, that is very important. It's especially annoying when you've got those comp restrictions that I mentioned earlier. You have to flick through all the menus just so you can get a reminder of what there is. There's just no place that shows everything at once when you need it. Overall, Soul Hackers 2 just left me feeling a bit disappointed in what it could have been. The gameplay is really good. It's still fun smacking demons and bringing up your Sabbath counter as high as you can. It's actually kinda addicting. It's the overall package which brings it down. With weak characters, weak story and weak dungeon crawling, it just led me to find the game a bit boring and tedious. I generally think if they cut some of the characters and focus solely on Ringo and Saizo, this game would be so much more fun. And also just giving it a little bit more budget. It's very clear that they were limited and they just need that extra push because they were so close to good things. But anyways, thank you all for watching. This is my first review of this type, so I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe because that would help out a ton. And make sure you follow me on my Twitch and my Twitter as well. See you all later.